Thank you very much for joining me in this video. I want to talk to you this morning about going the second mile. You've probably heard that expression, going the second mile. Where did it come from? What does it mean? And how does it apply in our life and in our business? If you roll the clock and the calendar back 2,000 years ago to the time Jesus Christ was on the earth, the Romans were the powerhouse. They were the dominant force, and they ruled with an iron fist. The nation of Israel was a sovereign nation, but they were under domination of the Romans. And the Romans had laws in place that controlled the Jewish people. And that's why the scribes and the Pharisees and so on continually tried to box Jesus in by questions like, is it lawful to give tribute to Caesar or not? The Romans had the Jewish people collect the taxes. They were the publicans, and they were hated. And there was a law on the books, if you like, that if at any time a Roman soldier approached a non-Roman citizen, he could force him to carry his armor a mile. Whether he wanted to or not, he had to do it. You can imagine if you were living there in that time and you had unexpected company come in and your wife sent you out to the store to get a couple of loaves of bread, and on the way you hear, hey, you! And you turn and there's a Roman soldier. Well, the hairs stand up on the back of your neck. You just know what's coming. You come here. He calls you over and he says, here, gives you his spear and his shield, all his armor, and he says, I'm on my way to Capernaum. I want you to carry it a mile. Well, you don't want to go a mile. That's out of your way. You got company at home. It's before the era of cell phones. You can't call back and explain why you're going to be missing for a best part of an hour while you lug this armament. You try to explain it to the soldier. He says, do it. You have no choice. You pick up his armor and you start trudging along with him on the way to Capernaum. And maybe every step you just begrudge it. You think, this is so unjust. This is so unfair. This is such a disruption to my life. You get to the end of a mile and you want to just throw the gear down and say, there you go, I'm out of here, and head off. But you don't do it. Jesus said, don't do that. When you reach the end of the mile, say, listen, I'll carry it another mile, and go a second mile. And you can imagine how that felt with the Jewish people when Jesus said that, to go that extra mile with the Romans. And I want to point out that when you go the second mile, there's a good chance that this Roman soldier isn't going to appreciate it. He isn't going to express his gratitude. He's going to say, you fool, that's why you're under submission to the Romans, because we know better. You think you accomplished anything by carrying it this the second mile? You did not. And you get misused and mishandled. And it's easy to say, I'll never do that again. After the way I was treated, I didn't get appreciated. He didn't even thank me. But there's a principle I want you to understand, and you absolutely need to get this principle. And the principle is that you didn't do it because of who he is. You did it because of who you are. And you need to carry that thought through. Otherwise, you'll never do it again. You'll be looking for payback. You'll be looking for appreciation. You'll be looking for thanks. And it doesn't come, you say, I'm never going to do it again. You don't do it because of who he is. You do it because of who you are. Let me give you a practical example. Some time ago, we have a sign outside of our building, the word RE/MAX in letters, and illuminated. And the illumination broke down. It wasn't working any longer. And because of the technology, we needed to change it to LED lighting. So we had to get new signs made. It wasn't easy. It isn't like a box with fluorescent tubes inside. So we searched around. We found somebody who could do it. We gave them a deposit, hired them to do it. And weeks turned into months without getting the job done. We'd call and we'd get the runaround. Sometimes they'd return our call. Sometimes they wouldn't. And I'll tell you, it took almost a year before the person finally came back and put the sign up. Well, within a week, we got a bill. My administrator said to me, Wayne, we got a bill for this work done. What do you want to do? I said, well, pay it. She said, aren't you going to make them wait? And I said, no, that's not how we do business. Well, about a week later, she got a phone call from the person who did the sign. And he said, I was shocked you paid me. I thought for sure you were going to make me wait months before you'd pay me. I said, what'd you say to him? She said, I told him that's who we are. Good for you. It's not because of who they are. It's because of who we are. And that's the principle you need to carry forward. In business, you're in real estate. Let's suppose you're working with a young couple and you spend a lot of time and effort and you find them in the perfect house. You draft the offer, you put in the protective clauses, You negotiate the offer, you get the deal put together, and then you walk them step by step through the building inspection, through the financing, get each one of those conditions lifted. Finally, you take it to closing. You've done your job. Well, you get a call from them on the day of closing. One of the things, the provisions in the agreement of purchase and sale, was that the seller was going to leave the fridge and stove. The buyers got in there, no fridge and stove. They call you, and their stock, they've used all their money for the purchase and the closing costs. They don't have the money for these appliances, and yet how are they going to function without a fridge and a stove? It's easy for you to say, well, call your lawyer. This is really out of my hands now. But you need to go a mile out of your way. You need to call, you can't call the seller because they're not your client, so you call the listing agent, you explain it to him, you ask him to check and get back to you. Now you have to call him again because you don't hear back from him. He says, well, the people are gone, I can't do anything. Then you contact the lawyer, you ask the lawyer to contact the other lawyer. He comes back to you and says, they're long gone, they're not going to make it good. To sue them, you're going to spend more money than they're worth. You do everything you can in going a mile out of your way, far beyond the job you were hired to do, to try and solve the problem. But the problem isn't solved. Well, it's easy to say, well, it's not my problem. My clients aren't at fault. I'm not at fault. They're just going to have to litigate. But the challenge is to go the second mile. What you're going to do now is you're going to call this couple and you're going to say to them, meet me at the Brick or some appliance store. You walk them through the appliances and say, I want you to pick out a fridge and stove. I don't want you to be at a loss. I'm going to buy them for you. And you buy them a fridge and a stove. You say, well, that's not fair, Wayne. I didn't cause the problem. No, you're going a second mile. You're going above and beyond what you're required to do. And here's the thing. They may not thank you. Often you don't get repaid from the people that you do it for. In fact, 2 years further down the line, you're liable to drive by that house and see a for sale sign on the lawn with somebody else's sign on it. You'll think, I'll never do that again. They didn't even appreciate me. Well, you'd think that if you were doing it for them, but you're not. You're doing it because of who you are. And that's a principle in Scripture. In fact, if you go back to the Levitical law, under Moses, it taught that if your enemy, neighbor, has an ox or an ass and it falls down, help him lift it back up again. If it strays into your field, then you need to take the time to take it back. Jesus said, if your enemy is thirsty, give him water to drink. It'll heap coals of fire on his head, and the Lord will repay you. He said, pray for those who despitefully use you. It's a principle that's taught throughout Scripture, going the second mile. Not because of who they are, because of who you are. And the second part of this principle you need to get is the abundance principle, the prosperity principle. When you give abundantly, you will reap prosperously. It's a principle. It says that any good deed that you do, God will repay you. They won't repay you. God will repay you. So it needs to be a way you live your business, a way you live your life. Going the second mile. Understand because of who you are, and understand God will prosper you and bless you because of it. Thank you very much for joining me in this video. I'll talk to you again next week.